The security guard's flashlight trembled as he approached the bronze doors of Forest Lawn Memorial Park's great mausoleum. It was exactly 15 years since the world had said goodbye to the King of Pop, and tonight, something was different. Marcus Rodriguez had worked these grounds for over a decade, but he'd never seen anything like what was happening now. The marble floor beneath his feet vibrated with an almost musical rhythm. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but as he moved closer to the famous tomb, the sensation grew stronger. The air itself seemed to pulse with energy, as if the very walls were breathing. Marcus had heard stories from other gods about strange occurrences, whispers in the night, unexplained sounds echoing through the corridors. But this was real, and it was happening right now. His radio crackled to life, startling him in the silence. "Marcus, you copy? We're getting some weird readings on the motion sensors near the Jackson Memorial." The voice belonged to Janet, the night supervisor who had been skeptical of the ghost stories until tonight. "I'm here now," Marcus whispered into his radio, his voice barely audible. "Janet, you need to see this. The whole area it's like it's alive." As he spoke, a soft melody began to drift through the air. It wasn't coming from any sound system or radio. The music seemed to emerge from the walls themselves, a haunting version of Billie Jean that made Marcus's skin crawl with both fear and wonder. The notes were crystal clear, yet ethereal, as if being played by invisible instruments. Marcus had always been a fan, like millions of others around the world. He remembered the day the news broke 15 years ago, how the entire planet seemed to stop and mourn together. But standing here now, feeling this unexplainable presence, he wondered if they had really said goodbye at all. The bronze nameplate seemed to glow with an inner light, the engraved letters spelling out that legendary name appearing to shimmer and dance before his eyes. Marcus rubbed his eyes, thinking exhaustion was playing tricks on him. But when he looked again, the phenomenon continued. Something was definitely happening here, something that defied all logical explanation. His phone buzzed with a text message from his wife. "Can't sleep. Having dreams about music and dancing. Are you okay at work?" Marcus stared at the message in disbelief. His wife lived 20 miles away and had never shown any interest in his work at the cemetery. How could she be experiencing something connected to what he was witnessing? The temperature in the mausoleum began to drop noticeably. Marcus could see his breath forming small clouds in the suddenly frigid air. But instead of the oppressive cold he expected, there was something comforting about it, like being embraced by a gentle presence that meant no harm. The music grew slightly louder, and now he could swear he heard the faint sound of feet moving in rhythm, as if someone was dancing just out of sight. Marcus pulled out his phone and started recording, knowing that no one would believe him without proof. As soon as he pressed record, the screen flickered with interference, showing brief flashes of what looked like concert footage that he had never seen before. Images of performances, recording studios, and intimate moments flashed across his phone screen in rapid succession. "This is impossible," he muttered to himself, but the evidence was right there in his hands. 15 years after the world had lost its greatest entertainer, something extraordinary was beginning to unfold. Marcus realized he wasn't just a witness to something supernatural. He was being chosen to uncover a truth that had been hidden for a decade and a half. The bronze doors behind him suddenly clicked, the sound echoing through the mausoleum like a gunshot. Marcus spun around, his heart pounding, but there was no one there. When he turned back to the memorial, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Fresh flowers lay at the base of the tomb, flowers that definitely hadn't been there when he started his rounds just 30 minutes earlier. As he knelt to examine the flowers, Marcus noticed they were the exact same type that had been placed on the star on Hollywood Walk of Fame every year on the anniversary. White roses and red carnations, arranged in a pattern that spelled out MJ in cursive letters. But who could have placed them here? The mausoleum had been locked all evening, and Marcus had the only key. His radio crackled again, this time with Janet's voice sounding urgent and confused. "Marcus, we've got multiple witnesses calling in from outside the gates. They're reporting music coming from inside the memorial park, and some are claiming to see lights moving around the Jackson tomb. We need you to investigate immediately." Marcus looked around the mausoleum one more time, taking in every detail of this impossible scene. The music was still playing. The air still vibrated with energy, and the flowers remained fresh and beautiful at his feet. Whatever was happening here tonight was just the beginning of something much larger, something that would change everything the world thought it knew about what happens after we say goodbye to our heroes. He keyed his radio one final time before venturing deeper into the mystery. Janet, you're going to want to call the authorities. But more importantly, you're going to want to call the media. 15 years later, the King of Pop has something to tell us, and I don't think the world is ready for what we're about to discover. Dr. Sarah Chen had seen many impossible things during her career as a paranormal investigator, but nothing had prepared her for the call she received at 3 a.m. The voice on the other end belonged to Marcus Rodriguez, a security guard at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, and what he described sounded like the discovery of a lifetime. "You have to understand, Dr. Chen," Marcus said, his voice shaking with excitement and fear. "This isn't just some ghost story. There's something physical happening here, something that's changing the actual structure of the building." Sarah arrived at the memorial park within an hour, bringing with her a team of specialists and equipment that could measure everything from electromagnetic fields to temperature variations. What they found defied every scientific principle she had studied in her 20 years of research. The mausoleum had transformed overnight. Where once stood a simple memorial chamber, there was now clear evidence of a hidden room behind the main wall. The marble that had appeared solid for 15 years was now translucent, revealing glimpses of what lay beyond. Through the ghostly stone, Sarah could make out the outline of furniture, walls covered with what appeared to be photographs, and most remarkably, shelves lined with what looked like recording equipment. "How is this possible?" asked Dr. James Wright, the structural engineer Sarah had brought to examine the building. "According to the original blueprints, there's nothing behind this wall except solid earth. Yet my instruments are showing a chamber approximately 20 feet by 15 feet, with a ceiling height of 10 feet. Sarah ran her hands along the translucent marble, feeling for any physical changes in the surface. To her amazement, her fingers passed through the stone as if it were made of thick fog. The sensation was neither cold nor warm, but something entirely different, like touching liquid starlight. "Marcus, you said the music started around midnight." Sarah asked, setting up her recording equipment. "Exactly at midnight," Marcus confirmed. "And it hasn't stopped since. But now it's different. Instead of just Billie Jean, I can hear what sounds like new songs, music I've never heard before." As if responding to their conversation, the hidden chamber began to glow with a soft, pulsing light. The translucent wall became completely transparent, revealing the room beyond in stunning detail. Sarah gasped as she took in the sight before her. The walls were covered with photographs spanning an entire career, some familiar to the public, others that had never been seen by anyone outside the inner circle. But it was the center of the room that took her breath away. A simple wooden desk sat beneath a vintage recording microphone, and scattered across its surface were handwritten pages covered with lyrics and musical notations. Next to the papers sat a leather journal, its pages fluttering as if moved by an invisible breeze. "We need to get inside," Sarah announced, her scientific curiosity overriding any fear she might have felt. "If this chamber really exists, if these artifacts are genuine, we're looking at the discovery of the century." Dr. Wright shook his head nervously. "Sarah, we don't know what we're dealing with here. The structural integrity of this phenomenon is completely unknown. What if you get trapped on the other side?" But Sarah had already made up her mind. She stepped forward and, taking a deep breath, walked through the translucent wall as if it were made of mist. The sensation was indescribable. For a moment, she felt as if she were floating in space, surrounded by stars and music and memories that weren't her own. Then she was through, standing in the hidden chamber, breathing air that smelled faintly of vanilla and old leather. The room was real, solid, and filled with treasures that would rewrite music history. Sarah reached for the leather journal on the desk, her hands trembling with anticipation. The first page bore a date from just 1 month before the world had said goodbye to its king of pop. The handwriting was unmistakable, and the words made Sarah's heart race. "I know my time is running short, but the music isn't finished. There are songs that need to be heard, stories that need to be told. If something happens to me, I've made arrangements for these works to be revealed when the world is ready. 15 years should be long enough for the pain to heal and for people to focus on the art instead of the controversy." Sarah flipped through page after page of lyrics, musical arrangements, and personal reflections. There were love songs that spoke of hope and healing, social commentary that addressed issues still relevant today, and spiritual pieces that explored themes of redemption and transformation. But most remarkable of all were the technical notes describing how this chamber had been created. "It's all here," Sarah called out to her team, her voice echoing strangely in the otherworldly space. "He planned this. Every detail of what's happening tonight was arranged years ago. The timing, the method of revelation, even the specific people who would be involved." She found a letter addressed to the security guard who cares about music and another to the scientist who believes in impossible things. There were detailed instructions for revealing the chamber's contents to the world, along with legal documents that had been hidden away for 15 years, waiting for this moment. Dr. Wright's voice came through clearly despite the barrier between them. "Sarah, you need to see this. The electromagnetic readings are off the charts, but they are not random. They are following a pattern, almost like a musical composition. It's as if the entire phenomenon is being conducted like a symphony." Sarah looked around the chamber one more time, taking in every detail. On one wall hung a white sequin glove, still sparkling as if it had just been worn. On another, a black fedora rested on a hat stand, positioned at the exact angle that had made it famous. And in the corner stood a recording booth, its equipment still humming with power after 15 years of waiting. As she prepared to return to her team with the journal and its revelations, Sarah noticed something that made her pause. In the recording booth, the VU meters were moving, showing that something was being recorded. She put on a pair of headphones and heard the most beautiful music she had ever experienced. New songs, performed by a voice that the world thought it would never hear again. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a memorial or museum. It was a living, breathing extension of an artist who had found a way to continue creating even after saying goodbye to the physical world. Sarah realized that what they had discovered tonight would change not just music history, but humanity's understanding of what it means to truly live forever through art. She carefully gathered the most important documents and artifacts, knowing that the world was about to learn that the King of Pop's greatest performance was just beginning. Music producer Tommy Morrison had received strange calls before, but nothing like the one that woke him at dawn. Dr. Sarah Chen's voice was breathless with excitement as she described what she had found in the hidden chamber at Forest Lawn Memorial Park. Tommy had worked with the greatest artists of his generation, but what Sarah was telling him seemed impossible. "Tommy, you have to come here immediately," Sarah insisted. "I'm holding master recordings that were made after the official final album. The dates on these tapes go right up to the week before everything changed." Within 2 hours, Tommy was standing in the impossible chamber, surrounded by recording equipment that hummed with mysterious energy. As a man who had spent his life working with the most advanced audio technology available, he was stunned by what he discovered. The mixing board before him was unlike anything he had ever seen, part vintage analog, part futuristic digital, creating a hybrid that seemed to exist outside the normal rules of recording technology. Sarah handed him a pair of professional headphones. "Listen to this," she said, pressing play on a tape machine that shouldn't have been able to function after 15 years without maintenance. The first notes that filled Tommy's ears made him grip the edge of the mixing board for support. It was unmistakably that voice, the one that had defined popular music for generations, but it was different somehow, more mature, more spiritual, filled with a wisdom that spoke of someone who had seen beyond the veil of ordinary existence. The song was called Beyond the Mirror, and its lyrics spoke of transformation, of shedding the physical world to become pure music, pure love, pure energy. Tommy listened with tears streaming down his face as the voice he knew so well sang about preparing for a journey that would allow the music to live on forever. "This is impossible," Tommy whispered, removing the headphones with shaking hands. "These recordings are pristine, studio quality. But according to the dates, they were made after the last known recording session. Where did they come from?" Dr. Wright, who had been examining the equipment, looked up from a complex array of instruments that defied identification. "Tommy, I think you need to understand something about this chamber. According to every law of physics I know, it shouldn't exist. Yet here we are. Maybe the question isn't where these recordings came from, but when they came from." Sarah pulled out more tapes from a cabinet that seemed to contain dozens of unreleased tracks. "Look at these titles. Letters to My Children, The Dance Goes On, Healing the World's Pain, Remember the Love, and this one." She held up a tape marked with simple words that made Tommy's heart skip a beat. For the fans who never let go. Tommy loaded the tape into the machine with reverent care. What he heard next would haunt him for the rest of his life. It was a personal message, spoken in a familiar voice, but with an intimacy that felt like a direct conversation with each listener. "My dear friends," the voice began, "if you're hearing this, then the plan has worked. 15 years have passed, and the chamber has revealed itself to those who were meant to find it. I want you to know that leaving you was the hardest thing I ever had to do, but I also want you to understand that I never really left at all." The message continued, explaining how the chamber had been created using technology that blended science with something far more mysterious. "Music is energy," the voice explained, "and energy cannot be destroyed, only transformed. I found a way to transform my energy into something permanent, something that could continue to create and inspire long after my physical form was gone." Tommy paused the recording, his mind reeling with the implications. "Sarah, if this is real, if these recordings are genuine, we're not just talking about unreleased music. We're talking about proof of consciousness surviving physical death." Dr. Chen nodded gravely. "That's not all. Look at this." She showed Tommy a detailed notebook filled with technical specifications. These pages describe a process called sonic consciousness transfer. It's part science fiction, part quantum physics, and part spiritual transformation. But if the recordings are proof, then somehow it actually worked. Tommy spent the next several hours listening to track after track of incredible music. There were dance songs that would have dominated the charts, ballads that spoke to the deepest parts of the human heart, and experimental pieces that pushed the boundaries of what music could be. But more than that, there were messages to specific people, family members, friends, and collaborators who had been part of the journey. One tape was labeled for Quincy, and Tommy knew it was meant for the legendary producer who had helped create some of the greatest albums in music history. Another was marked for the children of the world, containing a song that seemed designed to heal the pain of loss and inspire hope for the future. But it was a final tape that truly amazed Tommy. Labeled simply The Future, it contained music that incorporated sounds and styles that hadn't even been invented 15 years ago. The compositions used modern production techniques and electronic elements that were currently trending in today's music scene. How could he have known? Tommy asked aloud. These tracks sound like they were produced yesterday, using technology and musical styles that didn't exist when they were supposedly recorded. Sarah had been thinking about the same question. What if the consciousness that created these works exists outside of linear time? What if the process he discovered allows access to past, present, and future simultaneously? As if responding to their conversation, the recording equipment around them began to activate on its own. Lights flashed, meters moved, and tape machines started rolling. Tommy watched in amazement as a new recording began to create itself before their eyes. No one was singing, no instruments were being played, yet music filled the chamber. It was a song they had never heard before, being created in real time. The lyrics spoke of the moment they were living right now, describing their discovery of the chamber and their amazement at finding these impossible treasures. It was as if the consciousness that had planned this revelation was still present, still creating, still responding to the world around it. Tommy looked at the mixing board display and saw something that made him gasp. The date showing on the digital readout was today's date, but the timestamp indicated the song was being recorded 15 years in the past. Time itself seemed to be flowing differently in this chamber. "We have to share this with the world," Tommy said, his voice filled with conviction. "People need to know that love doesn't die, that art transcends physical existence, and that the greatest artists never really leave us at all." As he spoke, the newly created song reached its climax, and Tommy heard words that would stay with him forever. "The music never ends. It only finds new ways to dance with your hearts. Listen with love, and you'll hear me in every note, in every beat, in every moment when music makes you remember what it means to be alive." The revelation of the hidden chamber and its impossible content spread across the world like wildfire, but not through traditional news channels. Something far more extraordinary was happening. People everywhere were experiencing their own supernatural encounters with music and memories they thought were lost forever. Maria Santos was cooking dinner in her small apartment in Sao Paulo when her radio suddenly changed stations on its own, playing a song she had never heard before. As a familiar voice filled her kitchen, Maria began to cry, remembering the day 15 years ago when she had learned that her idol was gone. But now, somehow, he was singing to her again, and the words of the song seemed to speak directly to her own struggles and dreams. In Tokyo, 12-year-old Kenji Tanaka was practicing his moonwalk in his bedroom when his phone started playing music without any apps being opened. The song was called Keep Dancing, Keep Dreaming. And as Kenji listened, he felt an overwhelming sense that his practice sessions were being watched and encouraged by someone who understood the joy of movement and music. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, a grief counselor in London, was working late in her office when every electronic device in the building began playing the same melody simultaneously. Her clients had been calling all day, reporting dreams and experiences that seemed connected to the discovery at Forest Lawn. Elizabeth realized she was witnessing something unprecedented, a global healing event that transcended the boundaries between life and death. Back at the Memorial Park, the team led by Dr. Sarah Chen was documenting phenomena that challenged everything they thought they knew about reality. The hidden chamber had become a focal point for experiences being reported from every continent. Phone calls, emails, and social media posts flooded in from people sharing their own encounters with music that seemed to come from beyond the physical world. Tommy Morrison had established a makeshift recording studio outside the chamber, capturing testimonies from witnesses around the globe. It started 3 days ago, reported James McConnell, a radio DJ from Dublin. Every night at midnight, my station's equipment comes alive on its own. It plays music I've never heard before, but in that unmistakable voice we all know and love. My listeners are calling it a miracle. The phenomenon wasn't limited to audio experiences. Dance studios worldwide reported that their mirrors had begun showing reflections of performances that weren't happening in real time. Instructors watched in amazement as invisible figures demonstrated moves that had never been taught, as if the spirit of dance itself had come alive to continue teaching the next generation. Dr. Chen received a call from the Vatican, where Cardinal Alessandro Toretti described events that had the religious community buzzing with excitement and bewilderment. The Sistine Chapel filled with music last night, the Cardinal explained. Not from any choir or organ, but from the air itself. It was a song of redemption and forgiveness, sung in a voice that seemed to come from heaven itself. Our theologians are debating whether we're witnessing a modern miracle. In Memphis, at Graceland, visitors reported that the King's Mansion had begun playing host to spontaneous musical events. Tour guides spoke of hearing harmonies that blended the past with the present, creating a bridge between different eras of popular music. The two kings of music seemed to be collaborating across time and space, their combined energy creating something unprecedented in musical history. Scientific institutions around the world scrambled to understand what was happening. The European Organization for Nuclear Research, CERN, detected unusual energy patterns that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the musical experiences being reported globally. Dr. Klaus Weber, a quantum physicist studying the phenomenon, proposed a theory that consciousness could exist as pure energy, capable of influencing matter and electronic devices across vast distances. What we're seeing isn't just spiritual or emotional, Dr. Weber explained in an emergency conference call with researchers worldwide. There are measurable effects on electromagnetic fields, radio frequencies, and even gravitational sensors. It's as if a new form of consciousness is interacting with our physical reality in ways we never thought possible. Children seemed particularly sensitive to the phenomenon. Schools reported that students were spontaneously breaking into choreographed dances they claimed to have learned in their dreams. Art classes produced drawings and paintings depicting musical scenes and celestial concerts that showed remarkable consistency across different countries and cultures. The impact on the music industry was immediate and profound. Recording artists found their studios filled with unexplained inspiration, leading to a surge of new music that carried themes of love, unity, and transcendence. Producers reported that their equipment would occasionally add layers of sound that weren't being recorded by any instruments, as if invisible musicians were collaborating on every song. Dr. Chen's team worked around the clock to document and analyze each report, building a database of experiences that painted a picture of unprecedented global synchronicity. It's not random, Sarah explained to a gathering of international researchers. There's a pattern to these experiences. They are most intense around moments of human connection, when people are dancing, singing together, or sharing memories of how music has impacted their lives. The chamber itself had evolved beyond its original state. The walls now displayed moving images of concerts and private moments, creating a living museum that updated itself with new content daily. Visitors could see performances that had never been recorded, intimate conversations about the creative process, and glimpses of the preparation that had gone into creating this massive 15-year revelation. Perhaps most remarkably, the chamber had begun responding to the emotions and thoughts of its visitors. When children entered, it filled with playful melodies and gentle lights. When grieving fans came to pay their respects, it offered comfort through songs that spoke directly to their loss and healing. Mental health professionals reported a decrease in depression and anxiety among people who had experienced the musical phenomena. Support groups for grief and loss found that their members were healing faster and more completely than ever before, as if the universal language of music were providing therapy on a scale never before imagined. The world was awakening to the possibility that love, art, and human consciousness could transcend the limitations of physical existence. What had begun as one security guard's mysterious midnight encounter had become a global transformation that was redefining humanity's understanding of life, death, and the eternal power of music to connect souls across any barrier. The greatest show was just beginning, and every person on Earth had a front-row seat to the performance of a lifetime. 1 month after the discovery of the hidden chamber, the world had fundamentally changed. What began as an impossible revelation at Forest Lawn Memorial Park had evolved into a global phenomenon that united people across every boundary of race, religion, and nationality. The King of Pop's final performance was not a concert. It was a transformation of human consciousness itself. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the chamber that had become the epicenter of a new age, surrounded by representatives from every major scientific institution on Earth. The room had grown beyond its original dimensions, expanding in ways that defied architectural logic. Where once there had been simple walls, now there were galleries displaying artifacts from every era of music history, interactive exhibits that responded to visitors' thoughts and emotions, and recording equipment that continued to produce new music daily. The energy readings have stabilized at levels we're calling impossible but consistent, reported Dr. Klaus Weber from CERN. We're documenting the first known case of consciousness existing as measurable energy that can interact with physical matter while maintaining its essential nature as pure information. Tommy Morrison had established a permanent studio within the chamber, working with a team of the world's most renowned musicians and producers to catalog and share the continuous stream of new compositions emerging from what they had begun calling the source. Every day brought new songs that addressed contemporary issues, offered comfort to those in need, and inspired hope for the future. It's not just music anymore, Tommy explained to a documentary crew filming the ongoing miracle. It's become a form of communication between dimensions, a way for pure love and creativity to interact with our physical world. The songs that emerge aren't just entertainment. They're healing tools, teaching guides, and messages of unity. The global impact had been immediate and profound. Crime rates had dropped significantly in cities where the musical phenomena was strongest. Hospitals reported accelerated healing in patients who listened to the songs emerging from the chamber. Schools where children had experienced the dream dances showed remarkable improvements in cooperation, creativity, and emotional intelligence. Religious leaders from every major faith tradition had come together for the first time in history, united by the recognition that they were witnessing something that transcended doctrinal differences. The Vatican, the Dalai Lama, Islamic scholars, Jewish rabbis, Hindu gurus, and indigenous spiritual leaders issued a joint statement acknowledging that the phenomenon represented divine creativity expressing itself through human consciousness in a way that serves all beings. Marcus Rodriguez, the security guard whose midnight discovery had started it all, had become an unlikely spiritual teacher. People traveled from around the world to hear him describe that first encounter with the impossible. "I was just doing my job," Marcus would tell visitors, "but I learned that night that some jobs are bigger than we realize. I wasn't just guarding a memorial. I was keeping watch over a doorway between worlds." The chamber had become a pilgrimage site, but with a difference. Instead of being a place where people came to mourn the past, it had become a space where they celebrated the eternal present. Visitors didn't just observe. They participated in the ongoing creation of music and meaning that flowed from the source. Children were the most natural participants in the phenomenon. They seemed to understand intuitively that the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds was far more permeable than adults had believed. Schools had integrated soul studies into their curricula, teaching young people to recognize and nurture their own connections to creative energy that flowed through all existence. Dr. Elizabeth Harper had documented thousands of cases of accelerated psychological healing connected to the phenomenon. What we're seeing, she reported to the World Health Organization, is the emergence of a new form of therapy that works through direct soul-to-soul communication. People are healing not just from grief and trauma, but from the deeper wounds of feeling disconnected from purpose and love. The music industry had been revolutionized overnight. Artists found that their creativity had multiplied exponentially, as if they were tapping into an infinite well of inspiration. Collaboration became the norm rather than the exception, with musicians from different genres, generations, and cultures discovering that their combined efforts produced results far greater than the sum of their individual talents. But perhaps the most remarkable development was the way the phenomenon had begun to expand beyond music. Visual artists reported that their paintings and sculptures were taking on lives of their own, continuing to evolve after completion. Writers found their stories writing themselves, with characters and plots emerging that addressed exactly what readers needed to hear. Dancers discovered movements that seemed to come from a choreographer beyond the physical world. Scientists working to understand the phenomenon had made breakthrough discoveries in fields ranging from quantum physics to neuroscience. The energy patterns emanating from the chamber had provided new insights into the nature of consciousness, memory, and the fundamental structure of reality itself. Several Nobel Prize-winning researchers predicted that the discoveries emerging from the investigation would revolutionize human understanding of existence within the decade. On the first anniversary of the discovery, a global celebration took place that was unlike anything in human history. People in every time zone gathered at the moment when Marcus Rodriguez had first heard that midnight music, joining their voices in songs that had emerged from the chamber throughout the year. The result was a planetary chorus that seemed to harmonize with the very rotation of the Earth itself. As the celebration reached its crescendo, something extraordinary happened. Every electronic device on Earth briefly synchronized, playing the same new song simultaneously. It was called We Are One, and its message was simple yet profound. Death is not an ending but a transformation. Love is the only force that truly lasts, and music is a language through which souls speak to each other across any barrier. Dr. Chen, standing in the chamber as the global celebration unfolded, realized that they had witnessed something far more significant than the return of a beloved entertainer. They had documented proof that consciousness survives physical death, that love transcends all limitations, and that the greatest artists never truly leave. They simply find new ways to dance with the hearts of those who remain. The hidden chamber continued to pulse with creative energy, producing new music, new healing, and new hope with each passing day. What had begun as a shocking revelation had become humanity's greatest gift, the knowledge that the music never ends, it only finds new ways to play. The King of Pop's tomb had revealed its greatest secret. It was never a tomb at all, but a doorway to forever, where the dance goes on and the song never stops. And every person on earth had become part of the eternal performance, their hearts beating in rhythm with a love that would never fade away. In the end, the most shocking revelation wasn't what was found inside the tomb. It was a discovery that there never was a tomb to begin with. There was only music, only love, only the eternal dance of consciousness celebrating itself through every soul willing to listen. The King of Pop hadn't died 15 years ago. He had simply learned to perform in a new dimension, and now the entire world was his stage.